everyone, I'm Hannah, aka Fruity Frog Creation. Welcome to the 1-year review of my business. I have been officially in business for 12 months. My very first market of last year was on August 21st, 2022. So it's been a full 12 months of my business. And I wanted to let you know how it's been, what I've learned, all of my expenses and how they've been broken down, as well as some negative experiences I had, some amazing positive experiences I had, and just an overall summary of what it's been like having a business for the past year. And I wanted to make this video because I haven't really seen any videos like it. I'm sure they're out there, but I haven't seen many of them, and I thought it might be interesting for all of you to see and a good reference if you're starting out a business or you're just looking to see kind of how it is starting out your first year and kind of curious about it. Today's video is going to be a bit of a longer one, so feel free to grab your crochet project or any other art project that you're working on, grab a snack, grab a drink, get ready, and we'll have a nice long chat. So just as a disclaimer, I'm in Canada, Toronto specifically, so everything's going to be in Canadian dollars. And things are a little bit more expensive here than I think in some other places, so just keep that in mind. I also wanted to mention that I am actually not going to go specifically into the exact numbers that I'm profiting or the exact numbers of items that I'm selling. So if you're looking for that in this video, I don't want you to wait around trying to find it. It's not going to be in this just because of my own security of my finances, but I'll give you a rough idea of the breakdown and all the information, just not the exact numbers. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is what I made and what sold. So I'm just going to talk specifically about my medium-sized regular items made of acrylic yarn. This is kind of based on what I made. So of course, some things I made only a few of and I sold 100% of them. So I made some stuff for Comic-Con specifically that was like Genshin related, video game related, anime related, and every single one that I made sold, but I made only like 3 of them. So it's hard to say whether those would have been bestsellers if I hadn't made tons and tons of them. So first of all, I have the Market collection, and that consists of all of my fruit. The absolute best-selling fruit by a long shot was the pear. I love this pear, it's absolutely adorable. I think it turned out really good, and I can see why it's really popular. She's super cute. I found that the fruit that sold the least was actually the orange, and everything else kind of fell in the middle between those two. Another one of my products that sold really well is the plants. Every single one that I made sold well, and I made about a dozen of those throughout the year. Another set of items that did exceptionally well were Pride themed items. I was also at a couple of Pride markets this year, so that makes a lot of sense, but I did different flags to represent different identities and made frogs, jellyfish, hedgehogs, dinosaurs, all sorts of stuff, but those sold really, really well. So I recommend making those if it's a good thing to sell in your area. Another item that did really well was my bubble tea. So this pattern is by Maddie Uni. I love it so much. They're very quick to make up. I use little paper straws and cut them up so that they fit in and pop in and out of the little boba. The best-selling flavors or colors were the light pink strawberry and the kind of light brown milk tea flavor. Another set of items that sold really well throughout the past 12 months were all of my kind of cottagecore themed items. And I think that's towards the end of last year that those did really well, which makes sense. But they also did well throughout the year, and I really recommend making them. So this included things like corn, frogs, mushrooms, ghosts, and pumpkins or jack-o'-lanterns. So I'm really excited to see if they continue to do well as we get into the fall season. So during the past 12 months, I sold more than 10 of each of those items. Another thing that I wanted to note just for your reference is the payment type. The interesting thing about having Square is that it keeps track of the types of payment people are using, and I thought it was helpful to know this because it's actually almost exactly 50% cash, 50% card, and then in terms of card, it's 50% credit and 50% debit. So I think that that gives you a really good sign of whether you should be using some sort of card reader or even taking e-transfer. E-transfer is not really something I do, and I think in the States people use more Venmo or other means of kind of having that electronic payment. But in terms of if you're looking to start at markets and you're considering whether to get a card reader, highly recommend it. I know for me it was about $60 and it has more than paid for its worth. It does take out a small fee, but to have 50% of the payments on card, it's definitely worth it. So next up, I want to break down some of my costs associated with my business during the past 12 months. By far, my biggest expense over the past 12 months was show fees. So this includes market fees for organizers. It also includes the show fees for things like Comic-Con, Pride, other bigger events. And I also included the costs for rent at storefronts in this amount. For the past 12 months, this ended up being 51% of my total costs. So I think in the future, I really have to be careful in considering how much I'm spending in terms of show fees and whether the show is really worth it. It's something that's really hard to kind of determine, especially in your first year. Another cost that was quite high was my yarn cost. So this was actually 27% of the expenses for my business. And I also calculated the cost of other materials used to make my items. So this can be things like hooks, safety eyes, stuffing, and more, and that was 7%. So the combined cost for all of my materials was 34%. Now, with starting a small business, you have a lot of startup costs, and I had to invest a lot in the materials for setting up markets. So this includes tents, displays, packaging, all of that. So my market supplies cost actually made up 16% of my expenses this past year. My total expenses were 81% of my sales. So that is extremely high. Some of these costs were one-time costs, such as things like a tent and a table, display items, all of that. But a lot of them were multiple time costs. Editing Hannah here. I realized watching this back that it might be a little bit confusing without actual numbers to talk about, so I just wanted to give you some example numbers just so that you can better understand kind of what the breakdown is like. So if I sold $50,000 worth of plushies and other stuff throughout the past 12 months, I would have only had a profit and a take-home amount of $9,500. So I need to assess moving forward how to make the profit margin a bit higher and to reduce my expenses while increasing my profit. So during the past 12 months, it's very interesting to see which months were profitable. I found that the months that were profitable were September of 2022, October of 2022, November of 2022, December of 2022, and then March of 2023 and June of 2023. So I think the reason for this is in March of 2023, I had Comic-Con, which is quite a big show. And while the booth fee and the expenses are quite high, your profit is much higher with that many attendees. Also in June, like I mentioned, had a whole bunch of Pride markets. And again, you have a lot of traffic with those kinds of events, so the profit was higher. As for the end of last year, I obviously have to wait and see if September through December of 2023 will be as successful. I think part of the problem why the other months weren't profitable were the number of markets I was doing, but also the economy right now. So I really want to see going forward if those next few months will be profitable as well. So that's a summary of all of the numbers and the proportions of everything that happened within the past 12 months for my business. So now I want to talk a little bit more about what I actually did in the past 12 months. I attended over 20 markets. This includes markets at businesses, outdoors in parks, at nonprofits, in churches, and at larger venues. I'm planning on making a video with tips on how to get started at markets in the future, so let me know down in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in. I love to help other people get started with their business and just help teach other people all sorts of things that I've learned in general. So let me know if there's anything you want to know more about or you have questions about, and I'd be so happy to help you. One thing that I found that mattered a lot about markets is how they were advertised. I found that well-established community markets did really well for me. I also found that markets that kind of targeted the right audience for me were excellent. Things like in universities or colleges. Markets out in parks did okay. It really depended what kind of audience came through on those days. The markets that I found didn't do as well for me were typically markets in churches, smaller markets that were less well known. Sometimes it was due to higher fees associated with those markets or people just not being really familiar with what's going on. So I learned it's just important to find the best market for me and my target audience. One of the bigger events that I did this year that I already mentioned was Toronto Comic Con. That was an incredible, wonderful experience. I met so many people that absolutely love my stuff and had an amazing time with other vendors. It was a lot of work and a lot of stress, and while the expenses were high, I think it was definitely worth it. Another thing I accomplished this year was I got into one of the biggest malls in the city. It's called the Eaton Centre, and this was through a pop-up store run by a market organizer that I've worked with in the past. It was absolutely wonderful. They had tables set up and you just brought your items to the store. And I didn't even have to be there. There were staff there, and it was a very successful event for me. This year, I also got into a storefront that has all sorts of vendors selling items throughout the entire store. There's quite a few stores like this in Toronto, throughout Canada and the United States. I'm not sure about other places, but essentially you pay rent, you get a designated spot, and you're able to design it how you would like and place your items there for sale. It was so much fun setting up a space that was all branded around my business. I ended up leaving, but it was such a fun experience while I was there, and I might consider going back in the future. I also wanted to make a video about my experience selling in storefronts inside the mall and also at that store, and just give you tips and more information about it. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to let me know. Another major event that I did this year was Toronto Pride. This was so much fun, but probably the most stressful thing I did the whole year. I was there with another market organizer that I've worked with in the past, so I only did one day, and it was kind of a trial run to see how I would be able to handle doing the full Pride event in the future. Normally you have to be there for 3 days and for many hours. It's quite an intensive event, so I wanted to see how it would go. I'm not sure if I would be able to do the 3-day event in the future, but I would consider doing 1 day again if that market organizer ran it again, because it was such a wonderful experience. I did really well for sales, and now I know to be more prepared for next time. So next up, I want to talk a bit about some negative experiences I had and some challenges I faced, as well as positive experiences I had and why I enjoy my business so much and why it's worth it for me. One of the challenges that I faced in the past 12 months of my business is the disappointment of not getting into markets that I wanted to get into. So one of the events that I didn't get into this year is Fan Expo. Fan Expo is a bigger version of Toronto Comic Con, and it's happening at the end of this month. It's such a wonderful event. I really enjoyed Comic Con, so I was really hoping I'd get in, but it's quite competitive, and I heard a lot of people didn't get in this year. So I'm just gonna keep going at it and hope that I get in next year. And I feel like I learned that that's just the nature of business. There's some competition, and just because I missed out this time doesn't mean that in the future I won't be exactly what they're looking for. Another one of the challenges that I personally face is I have some health issues, and that made it quite challenging to have the physical aspects of the market and more of like the stress and overwhelming part. But I think a lot of artists, a lot of crocheters, a lot of makers turn to vending and selling their products because of health challenges that they face, mental health challenges, and so they're kind of turning their experiences into art and into opportunities for them to succeed. And I fall into that category. I absolutely love what I do, but at times it can be quite hard for me. And I think it's just important to rely on people that are willing to help you. I also really like to go check out markets if possible before I attend the event as a vendor to see if they'll be the right fit for me or if it might be too challenging given my health concerns. Another small but surprising challenge that I faced this year was weather. I did not anticipate how big a role weather would play in terms of success of markets, and the ability to do them with little to no stress. Wind, rain, and all of the elements can be quite challenging, especially if you're doing a lot of outdoor markets, and it can be kind of confusing if the event has a rain day or if they have an indoor space that they're going to use if it's raining and you don't really know ahead of time and you have to adjust. So I think it's important to be prepared for all sorts of weather. I'm learning and still continuing to learn how best to set up my display in terms of weather. Wind can be extremely challenging for smaller items that'll blow away, and you really don't want your crochet items to get dirty. So I'm continuing to work on my display so that it will be resistant to all the elements. Another thing I found that I kind of learned and faced some challenges with this year were mistakes I made in terms of purchases and investments for my business. So as I mentioned, my expenses were quite high, and part of this was due to buying items that weren't right for my business and having to buy things a couple of extra times. For example, the tent I got has actually some seams at the top. So the tent is designed more so for the sun and not for all the elements, because I found that when I was out in markets in the rain would leak through and water would drop onto my items. So I wish that I had been more thorough in my research for the items that I was purchasing for my business. I also got display cubes that were made from wire, and I didn't realize for the longest time what the plastic cubes were that I actually wanted, and I was able to finally find them, but it was after I had purchased the wire cubes, so then I purchased more plastic ones. I also had a wooden shelf made by one of my family friends, but I'm also finding that it's not quite right for my display, so I'm having to buy additional shelving. So a lot of those kinds of mistakes that you don't really know unless you do it and you make them were one of the challenges that I had this year, but I'm glad I learned from them. I hope in the future I can take that learning with me to not make similar mistakes and to think through my display a little bit more and all of that stuff before making more purchases to reduce those expenses. Another challenge that I faced this year was the issue of a small amount, very, very small amount of products being damaged or stolen. So this is one of those things that it's a bit hard to control. There's obviously ways of deterring it. I find it just hurts a little bit, especially when you've put such hard work into all of your items. I think as a crocheter, it's something to be aware of because products can be more easily damaged. And for me, I have a self-serve model, so I don't have multiples of each item behind me under the table. So anything that's out on the table is what people are going to buy, if that makes sense. So if something is damaged, it's not like it's the one for the display. That would be the one for the customers. So it's a bit hard when those types of things happen, but I think what I learned is you just have to accept it, not let it bother you too much. I also try to use signs that say to be gentle, but that doesn't always work out. So it's one of those things that you just have to accept a little bit and get used to. And lastly, I think that this is the biggest challenge that I faced over the past year with my business, and that is profitability. It's something that shouldn't really matter. It's not something that I value really, really highly. As I mentioned earlier, my expenses were equal to 80% of my sales, which means my profit is very, very low. When I'm calculating the amount that I'm making per hour, it's less than minimum wage. So I just want to make sure that I'm being valued for my time. Throughout the past year, I started to have doubts and question whether it was worth it to continue my business. But especially right now, as I start to feel a stretch of slower markets, I get a little bit nervous, but the lows that you experience aren't necessarily indicative of how things will be going forward. So if I find that it isn't worth it long term, then I will reassess in the future. But for now, I don't want to give up. I want to keep going and see if I can grow the business still. Okay, all of the negative experiences and challenges are out of the way. Now it's time for some of the positive things that I experienced in the past 12 months with my business. One of the most amazing parts of being a vendor at markets is meeting other vendor friends. There are so many talented and passionate people who just love their art, love sharing art with others and talking about it. I also find that a lot of the vendor community is super nerdy, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. So we have a lot of shared interests, whether it's video games, anime, all sorts of stuff like that. And it's really amazing to have events where you know there's other people who will help you out and watch out for your stuff, and you can rely on them. I also really enjoyed meeting market organizers. They do so much work to make sure markets go smoothly, and it's been such a pleasure to work with them. A lot of market organizers are so kind and want you to do really well with your business and love supporting you in every way possible. One of the things that I'm really proud of in the past 12 months is I feel like my crocheting skill has gotten a lot better. It's actually interesting to look back on where I started back in the summer of last year, and I'm like, oh wow, like my stitches are tighter, everything's cleaner, and I find that I stuff my items in a way that looks quite a bit better. So I'm really proud of the way that my actual crocheting skill has improved over the past year. And of course, the reason why I do markets, the reason why I have this business, and the thing that I'm most grateful for and brings me the absolute most joy is customers and the people who interact with my business. I have some people that are return customers that I love to see at a whole bunch of different markets who come by just for my stuff, and I am so shocked and amazed every time that happens. And regardless if someone made a purchase from me, complimented my stuff, engaged with my content, it is so incredible to receive positivity and feedback from customers and attendees and people online. While it's so amazing to like sell all your items out and feel accomplished in that way, to me, the meaningful part of it is interacting with people and forming those connections. I know it sounds super cheesy, but on all of my market applications and in my little descriptions of my business, I always say that my products are designed to bring joy to all. And I really hope that I can do that. I feel like I get feedback from people saying that my products make them happy, make them smile, that they're so cute. And that's the best part. I know that a lot of other crocheters, I'm sure you feel that too. So it's the most rewarding part of it. And I look forward to continuing to have those interactions with anyone who comes to my markets and anyone who engages with me online. I have so many incredible stories and memories of interactions that just stand out to me. Anything from kids falling in love with my stuff, picking it up and giving it the biggest hug, to people on Halloween matching their costumes to things that I've made. I remember so many of these interactions. They're so special to me. And if you're considering starting to do markets with your crochet items or any of your art, I hope that you can find that joy and connection too. And I really recommend trying it out because that's totally the reason why it's worth it for me. So now that I've talked about what I accomplished this year, some highs and lows, and the breakdown in terms of finances, now I want to think to the future and what goals I have. I hope that in a year I'll come back to this video, review it, and do a comparison for what I accomplished in terms of the goals that I'm setting right now. So one of the things that I really want to work on is having multiple income streams. Right now, I'm working on manufacturing a whole bunch of goods that I designed. It's so exciting to have them come in. I love to make these little drawings that are in the themes of my business. I've made some frogs, I've made some fruit, and I'll be bringing them with me to markets over the next few months, so I'm really excited for that. I have already made stickers, washi tape, and acrylic keychains, and I'm hoping in the future that I'll make sticker books, enamel pins, lanyards, and more stuff like that. Something that I've really wanted to do for the past year, but I just haven't gotten around to it, so I hope I can do it over the next 12 months, is start up my website. I really want to be able to take online orders. I know people in the past have asked if I take online orders, but it's always a struggle to manage inventory for markets as well as stuff to have online. So I'm slowly preparing the items that I would need, such as the boxes, poly mailers, all of that stuff. So I'll be ready to have a release onto my website somewhere in the near future. I also really like making patterns, and I would love to share my patterns with people. I already printed out one of my patterns for sale physically in person at markets, made into this tiny little book. and those have done okay, but I want to be able to put my patterns online. I'm hoping to have some free patterns up on my YouTube, but also some paid patterns through my website or through Etsy. And that's something that I haven't gotten around to, but I think could be another way for me to gain some income through my business. Another one of my big goals that I have is improving my social media. It's really challenging for me to find the time to do it because I'm not very fast at editing or filming videos. It's not something that necessarily comes naturally to me, but it's something that I want to keep working on, and I want to make sure that it's more efficient so that I'm able to put out all of these ideas that I have. I have tons of plans for videos that I want to make to share with you guys. It's just about managing my time so that I find the time to make and edit them. Another one of my goals that is actually kind of funny is I want to learn how to drive. So I am scheduled for my driver's test. I'm way older than I need to be to start driving, but I've never needed to drive just because in the city there's so much public transit and financially it wasn't worth it for me. But now because I'm going to so many markets, there's a reason for me to be driving, and I think it's a really good goal to have to help me be able to move around more easily and not have other people have to drive me around to markets and events. I also would like to more accurately keep track of my business expenses and pricing. In the past, I haven't really based my pricing exactly off of how much yarn and stuffing I use or how long it takes to make an item. I've just kind of estimated, but I want to be more accurate in keeping track of that so I can price appropriately for the customer as well as for me and valuing my time. And lastly, one of my biggest goals for next year is to get into the larger shows that I applied to that I didn't get into. So one of those would be Fan Expo, and there's a few other larger and mid-sized shows in the city that I would really like to get into, and it's just one of those big goals to help grow my business. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope that that was interesting or valuable to you. I know things would be pretty different depending on where you are in the world and what types of things that you're selling, but it might be helpful to kind of see what it was like for me over the past 12 months, some of the things that I learned, some of the things I experienced, and kind of a ratio of the finances. As I mentioned, I would love to make more videos with tips on how to start at markets, how to get into storefronts, and all of that. So let me know in the comments down below if that's something that interests you. Thank you all so much for watching my videos and supporting my business over the past 12 months. See you next time. Bye!